"You need to get out of that seat right now. You don't belong in first class." The words cut through the airplane cabin like a knife, each syllable designed to wound. 10-year-old Jennifer sat frozen in seat 2A, her small body trembling as she clutched her boarding pass so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The excitement that had filled her heart just moments before was now replaced by a crushing confusion that made her chest feel tight. Tears were starting to form in her eyes as she stared up at the angry white woman towering over her like a dark storm cloud. Jennifer's mind raced with questions she was too young to understand. Why was this woman so angry? What had she done wrong? The pride she had felt about earning this seat through her hard work was melting away, replaced by a deep shame she didn't deserve to feel. Jennifer's small voice trembled like a leaf in a hurricane as she tried to speak through her confusion and hurt. "But this is my seat," she whispered, her words barely audible above the pounding of her own heartbeat. "My mom bought this ticket for me because I got straight A's on my report card." Her hands shook as she held up her boarding pass, the paper now damp with her nervous perspiration, showing seat 2A clearly printed on it like a beacon of her innocence. But Matilda wasn't listening. Her face was red with an anger that seemed to consume her completely, her entitlement burning like acid as she continued her shocking assault on a child's dignity. "I don't care what story you've been told to say. People like you don't fly first class, and I'm not going to stand here and let this airline be scammed by some elaborate fraud scheme." Jennifer felt her world collapsing around her. The special day her mother had planned, the reward for all her hard work and dedication, was turning into a nightmare that would follow her for years to come. But to understand how we got to this shocking moment, we need to go back 30 minutes earlier, when a little girl's dream trip was about to turn into her worst nightmare. If you want to see how this incredible story unfolds, and how discrimination became someone's downfall, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because you won't believe what happens next. Now here's what I want to know. Have you ever witnessed discrimination like this on a flight or in public? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this story is about to take a turn that nobody saw coming. 30 minutes earlier, the morning had started like a fairy tale for 10-year-old Jennifer. She bounced around her bedroom with the pure, infectious joy that only children possess, carefully packing her favorite books and snacks into her small backpack with the reverence of someone preparing for the adventure of a lifetime. This wasn't just any ordinary flight. This was her reward for achieving something incredible that had taken months of dedication, late night studying, and pushing through subjects that challenged her young mind. Her mother, Dana Houston, stood in the doorway watching her daughter's excitement with a warm smile that was tinged with both pride and a bittersweet awareness of how quickly her little girl was growing up. "Remember, sweetheart," Dana said, her voice thick with emotion as she adjusted Jennifer's backpack straps. "This first-class ticket is because I'm so proud of how hard you've worked in school. You've earned this special treatment through your own dedication and intelligence." Jennifer's eyes sparkled with pure joy, her face glowing with the kind of happiness that makes parents' hearts soar. "Mom, I can't believe I get to fly in first class all by myself. I feel so grown up." The words tumbled out of her with breathless excitement. She had never flown alone before, and the combination of independence and luxury felt like stepping into a dream she never dared to imagine. Dana's throat tightened with emotion as she watched her daughter's innocence and excitement. She chuckled softly, but there was something mysterious and weighted about the way she handled her phone when it started ringing. "I have some important business meetings on this same flight," she explained to Jennifer, her voice carrying the weight of responsibilities her daughter couldn't yet understand. "But don't worry, I'll be in a different section, and you won't even know I'm there." Dana stepped away to take what sounded like a very serious phone call, speaking in hushed, authoritative tones about quarterly reports and board meetings, her voice carrying a gravitas that suggested enormous responsibility. Meanwhile, across town, Matilda was having a completely different kind of morning that was slowly poisoning her mood and feeding the darkness in her heart. She was running late, stressed beyond measure, and everything seemed to be conspiring against her. Her taxi was stuck in traffic that made her blood pressure rise. Her phone battery was dying at the worst possible moment, and she was already mentally rehearsing the complaints and demands she planned to unleash on the airline staff, like weapons of frustration. Matilda had always carried herself with an air of superiority that masked deep insecurities and prejudices she refused to examine. She believed that certain privileges belonged to certain types of people, and she had very strong, ugly opinions about who deserved what in life, based on nothing more than the color of their skin. As she finally rushed through the airport, her sense of entitlement was already on full display as she pushed past other travelers with callous disregard and demanded priority treatment from gate agents, whom she saw as beneath her. When boarding began, Jennifer was among the first to enter the aircraft, practically floating with excitement as she found seat 2A and carefully arranged her books and snacks with the methodical care of someone savoring every moment. She pulled out her favorite novel and settled in, feeling like she was living in a dream that validated every hour she had spent studying instead of playing. That's when Matilda finally boarded the plane. Frantically checking her boarding pass for seat 23B in economy, her frustration already simmering just beneath the surface. But as she walked through first class, she stopped dead in her tracks, her eyes narrowing with disbelief and something much darker. There, sitting confidently in one of the most premium seats on the aircraft, was Jennifer, the young black girl who, in Matilda's twisted worldview, had no right to be there. Matilda's initial approach seemed polite enough on the surface, but there was a condescending edge that Jennifer's innocent ears couldn't detect. "Excuse me, sweetie," she said with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I think there might be some confusion. I think you're sitting in my seat." Jennifer looked up from her book with the innocent confidence that only comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong, her face still glowing with the joy of her achievement. She held up her boarding pass without hesitation, eager to share her pride. "No ma'am, this is seat 2A. See? My mom bought this ticket for me because I got all A's on my report card." The pride in her voice was unmistakable, the achievement still fresh and wonderful in her young heart. But Matilda's expression changed instantly, like a mask being ripped away to reveal something ugly underneath. The forced politeness disappeared completely, replaced by disbelief and something much darker that made the air around them feel poisonous. "That's impossible," she said, her voice getting sharper and more cutting. "There has to be some kind of mistake. Children like you don't just get first-class tickets." The casual racism in those words, "children like you," hit Jennifer like a slap, even though she didn't fully understand what was happening. She just knew something had shifted, that the woman's tone had become mean and threatening. When flight attendant Ava approached to help resolve the situation, she took one look at Jennifer's boarding pass and confirmed what everyone should have already known. "This ticket is completely valid," Ava said professionally, though her voice carried a protective edge as she looked at the confused child. "This young lady is absolutely in the correct seat." But instead of accepting the truth and apologizing for her mistake, Matilda's disbelief escalated into something much more sinister and cruel. "I don't believe it," she snapped, her voice now dripping with contempt. "This has to be some kind of fraud. There's no way this is legitimate." Jennifer's heart began to race as the woman's hostility became impossible to ignore. The magical feeling of her special day was cracking like glass, leaving sharp edges that cut deep into her young spirit. The situation was about to get much, much worse, and what Matilda didn't realize was that her behavior was being noticed by someone who had the power to change her life forever. If you're as shocked by Matilda's reaction as I am, smash that subscribe button because this story is about to take some incredible twists that will leave you speechless. Here's what I want to know. What would you have done if you witnessed this kind of treatment toward a child on a flight? Let me know in the comments, because Matilda's next move was about to cross a line that would have consequences she never saw coming. What happened next revealed Matilda's true character in the most disturbing and soul-crushing way possible. the mask of politeness completely shattered as her racist beliefs came pouring out like poison, each word designed to wound and diminish a child's sense of worth. "Listen here," Matilda said, her voice now dripping with a contempt so vicious it made nearby passengers gasp. "People like you don't fly first class. I don't know what kind of scheme this is, but I'm not falling for it." Her words hit Jennifer like physical blows, each syllable a hammer strike against the little girl's confidence and dignity. For the first time, Jennifer's composure began to crack like a dam under pressure, and the tears she had been fighting started to flow freely down her cheeks. Jennifer's small hands started trembling uncontrollably as she held her boarding pass even tighter, as if it were a lifeline in a storm she couldn't understand. "But my mom bought this ticket," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the sound of her own heartbreak. "I earned it with my grades." The pride she had felt just minutes before was being systematically destroyed by an adult who should have known better. Matilda's response was even more vicious, her words chosen specifically to cause maximum pain to a child whose only crime was existing while black. "Don't give me that sob story. Your kind doesn't belong in these seats. This is clearly some kind of charity case or fraud, and I'm not going to stand here and watch this airline get taken advantage of." The other passengers in first class were becoming visibly uncomfortable, their faces showing a mixture of shock, disgust, and helplessness. Some shifted uneasily in their seats, others exchanged horrified glances, and several began reaching for their phones with trembling hands. The toxic atmosphere Matilda was creating was suffocating everyone around her, turning what should have been a pleasant flight into a nightmare that would haunt them all. One elderly gentleman in seat 1B muttered under his breath, "This is absolutely disgraceful." A mother traveling with her own young daughter pulled her child closer, whispering reassurances while shooting daggers at Matilda with her eyes. Flight attendant Ava realized this situation was spiraling far beyond anything in her training manual. Her heart broke as she watched Jennifer's tears, and she quickly pressed the call button for backup, speaking into her radio with barely contained anger. "We need additional crew assistance in first class immediately. We have a passenger harassment situation involving a minor." Within moments, Captain Justin appeared, his uniform commanding instant respect and his face grave with concern as he took in the scene. A crying child being berated by an adult who seemed to have lost all sense of decency. He approached the situation with the calm professionalism that comes from years of handling difficult passengers, but his eyes flashed with protective anger. "Ma'am, I understand there's been some confusion, but this young lady's ticket has been verified multiple times. Your assigned seat is 23B in the economy section." But Matilda was far from finished with her cruel assault. The presence of authority only seemed to fuel her sense of entitlement and rage. "I demand to speak to real management. Not some flight attendant, not some pilot. I want to talk to someone who actually has authority here." Her voice was getting louder and more aggressive with each word, drawing stares from passengers throughout the cabin who couldn't believe what they were witnessing. Jennifer sat in her seat with a quiet dignity that was absolutely heartbreaking to witness. Despite the racist attacks and public humiliation that was shattering her young heart, she maintained her composure with a strength that most adults couldn't muster. She wiped her tears with the back of her small hand and sat up straighter, as if drawing on some inner reserve of courage that her mother had taught her. The contrast between her grace under fire and Matilda's ugly behavior was striking and powerful to everyone watching. More passengers were now openly recording the confrontation on their phones, their faces showing a mixture of outrage and disbelief. They had witnessed enough to know they were seeing something that needed to be documented and shared with the world. What none of them knew was that several rows back in business class, Dana Houston had been watching this entire nightmare unfold with a mother's heart breaking into pieces. She had initially tried to stay out of the situation, wanting to let Jennifer handle things independently and learn to stand up for herself. But as Matilda's racist comments grew more vicious and she watched her daughter's spirit being systematically attacked, Dana's maternal instincts were waging war against her professional restraint. Dana gripped the armrests of her seat so tightly her knuckles had turned white, her whole body trembling with barely controlled rage and heartbreak. Every fiber of her being screamed to rush to her daughter's defense, to unleash the full force of her power and position on this woman who dared to hurt her child. But she also knew that sometimes the most powerful lessons come from letting situations play out completely, allowing the universe to reveal people's true character before delivering justice. Tears streamed down Dana's face as she watched her brilliant, beautiful daughter being subjected to the kind of hatred that no child should ever experience. The woman who ran boardrooms and commanded respect from powerful men was reduced to a heartbroken mother watching her baby suffer. Captain Justin made one final attempt at diplomatic resolution, his voice carrying both authority and compassion. "Ma'am, I'm asking you respectfully to take your assigned seat so we can proceed with departure. This young lady has done absolutely nothing wrong, and your behavior is completely unacceptable." That's when Matilda delivered her ultimate threat, the words that would seal her fate and change her life forever. "Fine. Get me someone who actually runs this airline. And when I'm done talking to them, I'll have this whole crew fired for the way you've treated me today. I'll make sure none of you ever work again." The irony of that demand hung in the air like a loaded gun, pregnant with the justice that was about to unfold. From her seat in business class, Dana Houston slowly stood up, her decision made. She had heard enough. Her daughter had shown incredible strength and dignity, but no child should have to endure this alone. The time for staying in the background was over, and Matilda was about to learn the most expensive lesson of her life. As Dana began walking toward the first-class section with the measured pace of someone who held the power to change lives, several passengers noticed the determined, almost regal bearing in her posture. Her face showed a calm that was more terrifying than any display of anger. They had no idea they were about to witness one of the most satisfying moments of justice ever caught on camera. If you think you know where this is going, trust me, you have no idea what's about to happen next. Hit that subscribe button because the revelation that's coming will blow your mind and restore your faith in justice. What do you think Dana should do in this situation? Should she reveal who she is immediately, or let this play out even further? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because Matilda's world was about to come crashing down in a way she never saw coming. Dana approached the chaos with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent years in boardrooms handling much bigger crises than this, but never one that cut so deeply into her heart as a mother. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but there was an undertone of steel that made everyone in earshot pay attention. "I understand you wanted to speak to management?" Matilda barely glanced at her, waving her hand dismissively with the same arrogance she had shown everyone else. "Not you two. I need to speak to someone who actually has authority here, not another random passenger trying to get involved in something that's none of their business." Dana reached into her purse with deliberate, measured slowness, her movements controlled and precise. She pulled out her company identification card and CEO credentials, holding them up for everyone to see with the quiet authority of someone who had earned every bit of respect she commanded. "I'm Dana Houston, Chief Executive Officer of Houston Aviation Group." The words seemed to hang in the air like a thunderclap before Captain Justin stepped forward, his voice now filled with deep respect and barely concealed satisfaction. "Ma'am, I can confirm. This is indeed Dana Houston, CEO of Houston Aviation Group, the parent company that owns this airline and several others." The silence that followed was deafening and electric. You could have heard a pin drop in that first-class cabin as the weight of the revelation settled over everyone like a blanket. Matilda's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and then pure, absolute horror, as the realization hit her like a freight train, carrying the full weight of her own stupidity and hatred. Her mouth fell open, her face drained of all color, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Matilda was completely speechless. The woman who had been so loud and aggressive moments before was now struck dumb by the magnitude of her mistake. Dana's voice remained controlled, but there was steel underneath the calm surface and a mother's fierce love burning in her eyes. The young lady you've been harassing and making racist comments about is my daughter Jennifer. She earned that seat through her academic excellence and her character, and she deserves to be treated with the same respect as any other passenger on this aircraft." Jennifer looked up at her mother with tears of relief streaming down her face. The burden of fighting this battle alone finally lifted from her small shoulders. In that moment, she understood that she had never been alone, that her mother had been there all along, watching and protecting her, even when she couldn't see it. Matilda's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. All her bluster and demands evaporated instantly, replaced by the dawning horror of understanding just how catastrophically she had destroyed her own life. The woman who had been so confident in her hatred and entitlement moments before was now faced with the crushing reality of her actions. "Furthermore," Dana continued, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "your behavior today represents exactly the kind of discrimination my company has a zero-tolerance policy against. You have publicly humiliated and traumatized a child based solely on the color of her skin. Security will now escort you to your assigned seat in economy, and there will be significant additional consequences once we reach our destination." As if summoned by the sheer force of justice itself, 2 security officers appeared and flanked Matilda. Her walk of shame to seat 23B was captured on multiple phones, and you could see her face burning with humiliation and the crushing realization that her life as she knew it was over. Every step she took was recorded, every moment of her public disgrace preserved for the world to see. The other passengers began to applaud, softly at first, then more loudly, as the reality of what they had witnessed sank in. Justice had been served, and a child's dignity had been restored. The viral explosion happened almost immediately. Within hours of landing, videos of the confrontation were spreading across every social media platform like wildfire. The clips showing Matilda's racist comments, followed by Dana's devastating revelation, racked up millions of views, shares, and comments. The story touched a nerve in people around the world who had experienced discrimination or witnessed injustice. The consequences for Matilda were swift, severe, and life-altering. Her employer fired her within 24 hours after the videos went viral, citing company values and public relations concerns. Her social media accounts were flooded with thousands of messages of condemnation and criticism. She became the poster child for entitled racism, and her name became synonymous with the phrase Karen behavior and the consequences of unchecked prejudice. Her life was forever changed by those few minutes of showing her true character, and she became a cautionary tale that would follow her for years to come. But the real story, the one that truly mattered, was about Jennifer's incredible resilience and the power of a mother's love. Despite everything she had endured, the public humiliation, the racist attacks, the tears and confusion, Jennifer handled the situation with a maturity and dignity that inspired millions of people around the world. She became a symbol of grace under pressure and the strength that comes from knowing you are loved and supported. Dana's company released a powerful, heartfelt statement reinforcing their commitment to treating all passengers with dignity and respect, regardless of race, age, or background. The airline industry took notice, and several companies strengthened their anti-discrimination policies as a direct result of this incident. Jennifer's story became a catalyst for positive change in corporate America. The response from the global community was overwhelming and beautiful. Jennifer received thousands of messages of support from around the world, from children who saw themselves in her story, from parents who admired her strength, from adults who wished they had shown her courage in similar situations. Teachers shared her story in classrooms as an example of dignity and resilience. Parents used it as a teaching moment about standing up to bullying and discrimination. She became an inspiration to children everywhere who had faced similar treatment, showing them that they too could stand tall in the face of hatred. In the quiet moments after all the media attention died down, Dana sat with Jennifer in their living room, both of them still processing the intensity of what they had experienced together. The bond between them had been strengthened by fire, tested by adversity, and proven unbreakable. "You know, sweetheart," Dana said, her voice thick with emotion and pride, What happened on that plane taught us something important about who we are and who we want to be in this world. Jennifer looked up at her mother with eyes that seemed older and wiser than her 10 years, eyes that had seen the worst and best of humanity in a single afternoon. Mom, even when people are mean to us because of how we look, we should still treat them with kindness, right? We shouldn't let their hate make us hateful too. Dana's heart swelled with overwhelming pride as she pulled her daughter close. That's exactly right, baby. We stand up for what's right. We protect ourselves and others who can't protect themselves. But we never let other people's hate change who we are at our core. We rise above it, and we use our power to make the world better. Jennifer nodded solemnly, understanding in her young heart that she had learned something profound about strength, dignity, and the power of love to triumph over hatred. The little girl who had started that day excited about flying first class had learned lessons far more valuable than any academic achievement could ever provide. She learned about dignity in the face of adversity, resilience when under attack, and the incredible power of having people in your corner who will fight for what's right. She learned that sometimes the most important battles are won, not with anger or revenge, but with grace and the quiet strength that comes from knowing your own worth. And Matilda? She learned the hardest lesson of all. That assumptions about people based on the color of their skin can lead to the most humiliating and life-destroying moments imaginable. Especially when you discover that the child you're discriminating against happens to be the daughter of the person who literally owns the airline you're flying on. She learned that hatred has consequences, that privilege can be revoked, and that the universe has a way of delivering justice in the most poetic ways possible. If this story inspired you as much as it inspired me, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell because we need more stories like this. Stories that show justice being served, good people standing up for what's right, and love triumphing over hate. What lesson do you think Matilda really learned from this experience? Do you think she genuinely changed her views and examined her prejudices, or was she just embarrassed and angry about getting caught and facing consequences? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, we all have the power to stand up against discrimination when we see it. And sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply treat everyone with the dignity and respect they deserve, regardless of what they look like or where they come from. In a world that can often feel divided, stories like Jennifer's remind us that love, dignity, and justice will always triumph over hatred in the end.